These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. In January 1961, a B-52 broke apart over Goldsboro, North Carolina, dropping 2 Mark 39 nuclear devices that began their arming sequence on impact. In the 1950s, Jonas Salk led the team that created the first widely used polio vaccine in the United States, launching a massive national field trial. He did not patent it, and the vaccine helped push polio to near zero in the country. On May 15, 1940, the first McDonald's opened in San Bernardino, California. 5 days later, the first arrivals reached a camp in occupied Poland, a stark split screen of ordinary life and history. A German Red Cross nurse from Bavaria carries a portable medical kit supplied by the Bavarian Women's Association during World War I. Volunteers like her gave first aid and moved patients from field stations to hospitals across the German Empire. In spring 1945, Soviet artillery crews moved heavy guns into Berlin's streets for the final push that ended the war in Europe. They broke through strongpoints block by block until the city surrendered on May 2nd. On May 19, 1962, Marilyn Monroe wore this rhinestone gown to sing Happy Birthday to President John F. Kennedy at Madison Square Garden. The dress later sold at auction for about $1.2 million. In the early 1900s, an inventor built this crib-style wheel to train a baby's leg muscles by moving padded spokes around the child. The strange gadget had a short life, but shows how bold home ideas once were. Founded in 1823 by Stephen F. Austin, the Texas Rangers began as a frontier guard for early settlers. After nearly 2 centuries of service, they now operate as a state law enforcement division. In the early 1970s, a helicopter crew in Vietnam loads crates of rations and treats, precious cargo that kept morale up between missions. Many units personalize their aircraft with playful nose art, like the small bunny emblem on this Huey. In 1886, this Red Star cough remedy ad promised safe, quick relief for 25 cents. Brands stressed no harmful ingredients because many over-the-counter cures then were strong mixes. British commandos trained on a birch log and rope obstacle course in the Scottish Highlands to build balance, speed, and teamwork. At the new commando depot at Achnacarry in 1942, recruits had to finish this hard run to earn the Green Beret. Coin-operated vending machines once sold packs in bars, diners, and bus stations across the United States. As age checks grew stricter in the 1980s and 1990s, most were removed or required an attendant, so they are rare today. For much of the 20th century, home thermometers used liquid mercury sealed inside a thin glass tube to show temperature. Many countries later phased them out in favor of digital or alcohol types due to spill and disposal concerns. From the 1950s to the 1970s, many towns sent fogging trucks that sprayed insecticide to control mosquitoes, and kids often ran through the white cloud. The practice declined as new rules and research raised environmental and health concerns. On December 7, 1941, Japanese mini-submarines were meant to slip into Pearl Harbor and fire torpedoes in support of the airstrike. Several never made it inside, and one was stopped by a U.S. destroyer before events unfolded. In the 1920s and 30s, critics warned that jazz could cause moral panic and even odd health effects, showing how shocking the new sound felt. Some cities and states tried to restrict jazz clubs under jazz intoxication claims. In 1987, crews on Soviet Tu-95 bombers raised the tail turret to show friendly intent during intercepts. The guns up posture told trailing fighters they were not looking for a fight. In 1977, they are playing Pong on a home console with dial controllers, one of the first hit video games. Pong turned living rooms into small arcades and helped start the home gaming boom. In 1944, troops practiced crossing a river on a toggle rope bridge, while instructors set off staged blasts around them. The drill built speed, balance, and teamwork for real crossings in Europe. In 1975, Gary Dahl sold smooth stones as pet rocks, boxed with air holes and a tongue-in-cheek training manual for $3.95. The fad hit fast, over 1 million sold, and a goofy idea became a small fortune. From the 1930s, woody wagons with real timber, to the vinyl wood grain of the 1960s through 1980s, carmakers sold the look of a rolling cabin. In the 19th century, some towns panicked when post offices gave people private, sealed mail for the first time. Critics worried women could send letters or place orders without a husband's approval, but the service soon became everyday life. In October 1956, crowds in Budapest pulled down a giant statue of Joseph Stalin, a symbol of state rule. The image became a defining moment of the Hungarian uprising that briefly shook the region. In Houston's Mission Control, flight controllers watch a live television feed from the Apollo 13 crew during the tense return in April 1970. Rows of consoles tracked the capsule across the world as teams worked the rescue that brought the astronauts home. In 1978, Iraq's Vice President Saddam Hussein visited Fidel Castro in Havana, reflecting closer ties during the Cold War. Though still vice president, he was the key decision-maker in Iraq and became president the next year. In September 2001, Security Chief Rick Rescorla used a megaphone to guide a calm, fast evacuation from the South Tower, helping thousands reach safety. He kept directing people until he went back up the stairs and was not seen again. In 1940, Franklin Roosevelt campaigned with his running mate, Henry Wallace, a progressive former agriculture secretary. Party leaders later chose Harry Truman for the 1944 ticket, which made him president after Roosevelt's passing in 1945. Made around 1880 in Germany, for New York, Cutler John S. Holler. This giant folding multi-tool packed more than 100 implements into one showpiece. It carried blades, scissors, corkscrews. In 1967, a prototype robot policeman was tested to direct cars with a moving arm and baton, controlled from a nearby operator. It was mainly a traffic education demo that drew big crowds long before modern road robots. In 1944, a kamikaze pilot dives toward the carrier USS Lexington during a Pacific battle as tracers streak up from the deck. The ship was damaged but stayed in action and completed the mission. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. rides a bicycle on Fire Island, New York, in September 1967. A rare, quiet moment shows the civil rights leader between long days of travel and speeches. In the late 1800s, some doctors and advice columns warned that heels over 1 inch could harm posture and women's health. Despite the scare, high heels stayed popular and became a lasting part of fashion. In 1940, Home Secretary Sir John Anderson opposed building big, deep public shelters during the Blitz, warning they could cause a deep shelter mentality and slow essential work. Instead, most families used small backyard Anderson shelters. From the 1930s to the 1950s, parents and officials warned that comic books would spoil kids, pointing to scary covers and wild stories. Pressure led to the Comics Code in 1954, which softened content for years. In December 1941, British commandos raided the Norwegian island, striking ships and shore positions. A wounded raider is helped to a landing craft after the action, from a mission that made Germany move more forces to Norway. In 1990's film Edward Scissorhands, the hero's hands were custom prop gloves with scissor-like fingers. One screen-used pair later sold at auction for about $16,000 and became a prized movie collectible. Before photocopiers, schools used Ditto Spirit duplicators that pressed purple ink from a wax master onto each sheet. The copies had a sweet alcohol smell that every student remembers from handouts. In the 1970s, mass clinics used jet injectors and the small bifurcated needle to give smallpox shots, which often left a round scar on the arm. The global campaign ended in 1980, making smallpox the first disease wiped out by human effort. A Japanese dive bomber trails smoke after being hit over the Pacific in 1945. The plane falls in a long arc as bursts dot the sky. In 1942, Allied commandos reached a pebbled French shore as smoking landing craft and stalled Churchill tanks marked the hard-fought Dieppe raid. The setback taught planners key lessons they used for the Normandy landings 2 years later. On May 14, 1973, a Saturn V launched Skylab, the first United States space station, from Florida. Damage during ascent tore off its sun shield, and the first crew fixed it in orbit to save the mission. On March 28, 1966, Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi met President Lyndon B. Johnson in the Oval Office. Their talks focused on food aid and Cold War ties, as India faced a severe drought that year. In 1938, state authorities in eastern Poland took down a Ukrainian Orthodox church under a policy to reclaim property. Neighbors look on as the building is dismantled, a stark snapshot of shifting borders and rule before the war. In 1917, members of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps served in France as clerks, drivers, telephonists, and cooks, freeing more men for the front. Their work proved so effective that the unit later became Queen Mary's Army Auxiliary Corps and set a model for women's service. A corded landline meant one phone for the whole house, long cords, and the busy signal. If you were out, you used a payphone or just waited. No caller ID, texting, or voicemail. In the late 1800s, street carts and lunch counters in U.S. port cities sold Hamburg-style chopped beef and early hamburger patties, often for 5 cents, to attract recent arrivals from Europe. In 1939, a Swedish lawmaker filed a protest nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the German leader, then withdrew it within days. The committee never considered it, a reminder that nominations are not endorsements. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, a Japanese engineer, was in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, survived the blast, and returned home to Nagasaki the next day. He lived through the second attack on August 9, and later told his story to encourage peace. On May 14, 1945, a diving Zero struck USS Enterprise and blasted the forward elevator an estimated 400 feet into the air. The carrier's crew made rapid repairs, and the ship returned to duty within days. In 1950s, Wyoming, Trail Creek Ranch stacked hay while a John Deere rolled past the Tetons and families pitched in. Dude ranches like this blended real work with Western vacations and helped spark Wyoming's tourism boom. In 1946, Eva Schloss sits with a small bird after surviving a wartime camp and starting life again. When Otto Frank married her mother in 1953, she became Anne Frank's posthumous stepsister. Princess Ashraf Pahlavi, twin sister of the Shah, visits a nursing school in 1970s Iran while promoting education and public health. She served as a United Nations delegate and backed programs that expanded training for women across the country. In November 1938, locals in southern Slovakia waved flags and greeted Hungarian troops with flowers after the first Vienna Award shifted the border. Street musicians in Meiji, Japan play the gekin, a moon-shaped lute brought from China in the 19th century. They worked festivals and busy corners, blending folk tunes with new city songs as the nation modernized. In the early 1920s, temporary wire fences and armed patrols managed crossings along the U.S.-Mexico line. Many border towns still shared daily trade and family ties, so people often talked through the fence as inspections tightened. In the 1860s, inventor Sylvester H. Roper built a steam velocipede, an early motorcycle powered by a small boiler, decades before gasoline bikes took over. During an 1896 speed run near Boston, he suffered a fatal heart attack and crashed, leaving historians unsure which came first. In the 1750s, engineer Carlisle Spedding made a hand-crank spark lamp using flint and steel, thought safer than candles in gassy tunnels. In 1755, an underground gas accident linked to one of these lamps cost him his life and pushed later designers toward enclosed safety lamps. In May 1940 at Dunkirk, troops waited on open beaches while enemy aircraft made repeated runs overhead. A fleet of Navy ships and small boats evacuated more than 330,000 people in 9 days. This 5 million volt Van de Graaff at Argonne used a moving belt to pile up static charge and hurl ions down its tube for early nuclear physics experiments. Machines like this mapped reaction cross-sections and trained the scientists. In the 1950s, many big industrial sites kept their own plant ambulances, like this Packard-based combo car, staffed by the on-site fire department and ready around the clock. These rigs carried a stretcher, oxygen, and basic first aid. In the Petawawa camp in 1922, a trainer led a cavalry horse through a burning carcass to reduce its sensitivity to noise, smoke, and sudden shocks. These exercises prepared horses to transport messages, equipment, and the wounded in chaotic conditions. At the 1939 Golden Gate Exposition, a neonatal pavilion displayed premature infants in advanced incubators, a showcase modeled on physician Martin County's exhibits. These shows drew public support and funding for modern newborn care. Trained studio animals like Rosie the bear often appeared in radio promos and newsreels, and here she rehearses with comedian Lou Lair at an ABC microphone in 1945. Variety shows loved such novelty acts long before today's stronger animal care rules and digital stand-ins. Before remotes, changing channels meant crossing the room. So many dads built long-arm solutions like broom handle remotes. Early sets even needed fine-tuning dials, making a yardstick the perfect lazy night tool. Buffalo Bill Cody, the face of the American West, was still alive in 1916 when German Zeppelins made headline airship raids over Paris. He spanned eras, from Pony Express trails to news of giant dirigibles in the sky, passing away the next year in 1917. Built of soaring wooden lattice at Nantasket Beach, Paragon Park's giant coaster was marketed around 1920 as the biggest roller coaster on Earth. When the park closed in 1984, the ride was saved and now runs as Wild One at Six Flags America. In May 1940, private vessels, ferries, fishing longboats, and family boats were towed down the Thames to join the rescue efforts at Dunkirk. This improvised armada of about 700 small vessels helped bring more than 338,000 troops to safety. WWE sailors mixed torpedo juice, lemon or pineapple, plus 180 proof ethyl alcohol siphoned from torpedo fuel. When the Navy tainted the fuel with croton oil to stop them, crews filtered it through bread or potatoes and kept drinking. University Motel began as a mid-century motor hotel with a glass-walled lobby, neon, and an AAA seal promising air conditioning, televisions, and phones. Interstates shifted traffic, and big chains took the guests, leaving this modernist shell as a clear snapshot of the roadside boom and bust. British explorer Alfred Maudslay turned this vaulted chamber at Chichen Itza into a field office in 1900, using early photography and plaster casts to copy every carving. Massive stones in this Incan wall fit so precisely that even a sheet of paper cannot slide between them, sparking debates about ancient engineering secrets. The German scientist's visit highlights ongoing mysteries surrounding how these walls were constructed over 500 years ago. These built-in funnels found in early 20th century kitchen cabinets are actually flour bins with sifters, allowing bakers to dispense just the right amount of finely sifted flour. The tubes on his chest are part of a choka, traditional Georgian clothing, used to hold ammunition for firearms after their introduction in the 19th century. This design became a symbol of Caucasian warriors and remains an iconic heritage garment. Cavalry units like these made dramatic charges on horseback during the early years of the First World War, relying on speed and mobility before modern warfare made such tactics nearly obsolete. Barn raisings like this one in 1910 brought entire communities together for a day of teamwork to build massive wooden structures for farming. The event often doubled as a social gathering, leaving lasting memories and solid foundations for future generations. The very first White Castle restaurant opened in 1921, featuring a small castle design and selling hamburgers for just 5 cents. This iconic building helped launch America's fast food revolution and set new standards for cleanliness and efficiency. This is an 1800s Fisk cast iron coffin designed to preserve bodies for long-distance rail transport and quarantine safety. The glass window allowed loved ones to confirm the identity before burial, even when viewing was restricted. After magician Harry Houdini's death in 1926, his wife Bess held annual seances, hoping to receive his secret code from the beyond. Despite global fascination, no message ever arrived, turning the Houdini seances into a legendary story of love and the search for answers after death. In 1966, engineer Frank Kutina and a mechanic inspect an advanced combustor rig designed to push the limits of jet propulsion at NASA's Lewis Research Center. This high-tech test cell setup helped make breakthroughs in engine performance and fuel efficiency during the space age. Operation Sandstone was a series of United States nuclear tests on Eniwetok Atoll in 1948, marking a new era in atomic bomb development. The explosions left iconic mushroom clouds and forever changed the fate of the small Pacific islands. Dubai Airport in the early 1980s was a modest desert outpost compared to today, featuring a single terminal and only a few planes parked on open tarmac. This snapshot captures the origins of what would soon become one of the world's busiest international hubs. Arthur Jones, inventor of Nautilus gym equipment, famously kept dozens of pet crocodiles at his Florida estate in the 1980s. His fascination with exotic animals matched his unconventional, larger-than-life personality. A massive traffic jam on San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge during rush hour in June 1980 turned the famous landmark into an unexpected pedestrian playground. Drivers left their cars and climbed atop vehicles, capturing a rare and surreal moment. The Lune-class Ekranoplan, a Soviet ground effect vehicle, could skim above the water at high speed while launching cruise missiles from its 6 rooftop silos. Tested in the late 1980s, it remains one of the most futuristic and mysterious weapons the world has ever seen. In 1975, Stevie Nicks, soon to become a rock icon with Fleetwood Mac, is captured stretching casually on the floor before a show. Her laid-back style and energy helped shape the spirit of an entire decade. After 444 tense days, 52 American hostages were finally released from captivity in Iran in 1981, ending the Iran hostage crisis and sparking global headlines. In 1986, an explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant destroyed Reactor 4 and released vast amounts of radiation across Europe. The disaster left this haunting ruin, making Chernobyl a symbol of both technological ambition and catastrophic failure. Motorola launched the world's first mobile phone, the Dynatac 8000X, in 1983, letting people call from nearly anywhere for the first time. This revolutionary device started the era of portable communication and transformed daily life. In December 1949, Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin met in Moscow to celebrate the start of diplomatic relations between the Soviet Union and the newly founded People's Republic of China. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Soviet submarine B-59 was forced to surface by U.S. naval forces in the Caribbean, narrowly preventing a global catastrophe. This tense moment is now seen as one of the closest the world ever came to nuclear conflict. Howard Hughes stands with his record-setting aircraft, the H-1 Racer, at the height of his fame as a daring aviation pioneer in the 1930s. In later years, Hughes became legendary for his reclusive lifestyle and obsessive health rituals. During the legendary Polish winter of the century, in 1978-1979, huge snowdrifts blocked entire road and railway lines, paralyzing the country for several months. This lone figure is waving a steam locomotive through high snow walls. Chinese-American children play on a mound of sand in the heart of San Francisco's Chinatown shortly after 1910, surrounded by shops advertising herbal medicine and fine arts. Massive 2,000-pound bombs are carefully hoisted for loading into a ship, a process that required both precision and nerve. These deadly weapons would have been destined for use in air raids during the Second World War. Miami Beach in 1925 was still mostly undeveloped coastline, with a few hotels and sunbathers scattered along wide stretches of sand. This aerial view captures the early beginnings of a city that would grow into a world-famous resort destination. During the legendary 1908 New York to Paris race, the American Thomas Flyer pulls the German Protos car out of a deep Russian mud pit. Acts of teamwork like this turned the grueling around-the-world journey into an unforgettable adventure. Ray Kroc's first McDonald's opened in 1955 in Des Plaines, Illinois, introducing the revolutionary speedy service system. This concept changed fast food forever, making burgers and fries ready in under a minute and turning McDonald's into a global sensation. A studio portrait from the early 20th century depicts a pregnant African-American woman in a morning dress next to a young man in a military uniform. In that era, home birth with the participation of midwives was common for black women. The set of The Abyss in 1989 became legendary for its massive underwater scenes, forcing actors to spend up to 12 hours a day submerged. On one take, Ed Harris actually ran out of air and nearly drowned. In 1945, Operation Cowboy united American and German soldiers to rescue hundreds of rare Lipizzaner horses from war-torn Czechoslovakia. This astonishing alliance helped save an entire breed from destruction during the final chaotic days of World War II. ENIAC was switched on in 1945 as one of the world's first electronic computers, packed with over 17,000 vacuum tubes and mountains of tangled wires. The machine could solve calculations in seconds, changing science. Workers at the Washington Navy Yard torpedo shop in 1917 built some of the most advanced underwater weapons of World War I. This busy factory floor created powerful torpedoes that helped shape submarine and naval battles for decades. Canadian firefighters, covered with a thick layer of oil, sealed damaged wells in Kuwait after the retreat of Iraqi troops in 1991, preventing one of the largest environmental disasters in history caused by human activity. These teams worked in conditions of toxic fumes and burning skies. This rare photo shows samurai warriors during the Boshin War in 1868, their era ending as Japan rapidly modernized. Many traded swords and topknots for uniforms and rifles, closing a legendary chapter in Japanese history. This is a Chinese seal set, with each carved stone meant for stamping personalized signatures or pen names onto artwork or documents. The ornate box and ancient inscription symbolize culture and tradition, transforming every seal into a piece of poetry. A giant zeppelin floats over the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C., creating a scene that looks straight out of an alternate reality. Jimmy Page unleashes raw energy on stage with Led Zeppelin in 1972, his signature guitar stance and embroidered pants becoming a rock legend's trademark. Epic performances like this cemented Page's place as one of the most influential guitarists in history. This ascetic from the late 1800s wore a welded metal grid around his neck, preventing him from ever lying down. Such extreme self-denial was seen as a path to spiritual enlightenment in some religious traditions. The average Royal Air Force pilot during the Battle of Britain was just 20 years old, facing deadly missions almost daily. Squadron leader Brian Lane, age 23 in this photo, survived countless dogfights before being killed in action 2 years later. Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm sits moments after her failed attempt to shoot President Gerald Ford in 1975, still wearing a dress and leg restraints. Her attack made her the first woman to ever try to assassinate a sitting United States president. Stalin, Truman, and Churchill met at the Potsdam Conference in 1945 to decide the fate of post-war Europe. Their decisions here reshaped borders, set the stage for the Cold War, and directly affected millions of lives across the globe. This Victorian morphine set features a glass vial labeled Morphia and a hand-assembled syringe in a velvet-lined box, typical for medical kits from the late 19th century. After the fierce fighting of 1898, American sailors raised the flag over Manila, marking a turning point in the Spanish-American War. This moment signaled the start of United States control in the Philippines and a new era of global power. In 1927, LAPD detective Oscar Bayer demonstrates a modified Thompson submachine gun with the stock removed and no magazine, a setup imitated by real bank robbers for speed and concealment. Vladimir Lenin stands at the center of Red Square during the second anniversary of the October Revolution in 1919, flanked by top Soviet leaders. This icy gathering symbolized the new power reshaping Russia. Parachutes drop supplies onto a Japanese airfield as explosions and smoke fill the landscape below, captured from an American A-20 Havoc bomber during the Pacific War. The foreground reveals a camouflaged Japanese aircraft surrounded by chaos from a bombing run between 1943 and 1945. Crowds gather at the bustling storefronts of New York City around 1865, with workers and residents perched in windows and on the busy sidewalk. A maze of bold painted signs advertises printers, carpenters, painters. This forged passport from 1966 shows Che Guevara disguised as Ramon Benitez Hernandez, a fictional Uruguayan businessman. Using this identity, Guevara secretly entered Bolivia to lead a new revolutionary campaign. Stripped to loincloths, sumo wrestlers clash in Japan around 1898, while a judge in traditional robes watches closely. These matches featured open-air arenas and intense physical contests, centuries-old rituals that defined sumo as the national sport. Japanese prisoners of war stand behind barbed wire as they listen to Emperor Hirohito announce Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15, 1945. This moment marked the official end of World War II and the collapse of the Japanese Empire. On January 27, 1967, the Apollo 1 crew walks the access arm high above the Florida coast, moments before entering the command module for a pre-launch test. This would become a day of tragedy, as a cabin fire during the test claimed the lives of all 3 astronauts and led to sweeping changes in NASA safety protocols. The White House kitchen in 1909 featured industrial-sized stoves, huge tanks for hot water, and a ceiling rack crowded with copper pots. This state-of-the-art facility was designed to prepare meals for presidents and their guests in America's most famous residence. In the 1940s, a parachutist radio operator carried an extensive kit: rifles, radios, grenades, medical packs, flares, and signal tools. Every item was organized for rapid deployment, allowing these troops to coordinate missions far behind enemy lines. German railway gun crew readies a track-mounted cannon during the invasion of Poland in September 1939, the opening phase of World War II. Some railway guns could send shells weighing hundreds of kilograms to targets over 30 kilometers away. A farmer in eastern Poland uncovered this rusted Piat, a British spigot mortar from World War II. Polish resistance fighters used Piats in the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, so this relic likely lay hidden in the soil for decades. In the 1960s, the original child actors recorded voices for the Peanuts television specials in real studios like this. Producers chose real kids for an honest sound, sometimes recording lines word by word to match the simple style. Sean Connery, photographed in 1974, playfully posed in a lace wedding dress, showing the offbeat humor behind his tough screen image. That same year, he starred in the cult science fiction film Zardoz, after his first run as James Bond. James Butler Hickok at age 21 in 1858, before the West knew him as Wild Bill. Within a few years, he became a celebrated frontier scout and folk hero whose name filled dime novels. This experimental French concept car, l'automobile, was designed by Jean-Pierre Pontieux in the late 1960s with a glass bubble body. Its 3 independent wheels and hydraulic tilt let the pod pivot and slide through tight city spaces like a small shuttle. An athlete from the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League dives for home plate in 1945 as women's teams filled ballparks across the Midwest. Founded in 1943 by Philip Wrigley, the league drew more than 1 million fans by 1948 and changed how people saw the game. Claudia Cardinale photographed in 1968 at the height of her international fame. That year, she starred in Once Upon a Time in the West and was already known for The Leopard and 8½. Robert E. Lee sits with his son and Lieutenant Colonel Walter Taylor at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865, shortly after the formal surrender. That meeting ended the Army of Northern Virginia's fighting and signaled the last days of the Civil War. This small wooden bench is a traditional coconut scraper used in South and Southeast Asia. You sit on the board and rub a halved coconut against the serrated metal grater to collect fresh flakes for cooking. Deutsche Lufthansa staff and travelers pose beside an all-metal Junkers airliner in 1926, the year the German carrier was formed. The new airline began stitching together regular routes across Europe from grass airfields and simple terminals. Marilyn Lovell reads a front-page story about Apollo 13 in April 1970, after an oxygen tank failure turned the mission into a rescue effort. Her husband, Commander Jim Lovell, helped guide the crew home with ground control, and all 3 astronauts returned safely. On March 2, 1938, floodwater from the Los Angeles River buckled the Southern Pacific Railroad bridge near downtown, twisting the tracks like ribbon. The record storms that week led the city to build concrete channels and new dams that still shape the river today. During World War I, Sir Charles Auguste Valadier turned his 1913 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost into a mobile dental clinic and treated British soldiers near the front. Working with Harold Gillies, he helped push for dedicated jaw and face units, an early step toward modern plastic reconstruction. In Sarajevo, on June 30, 1992, a 20-year-old fighter known as Arrow checks her scoped rifle inside a protected room. Born Serb but serving with Bosnian forces during the siege, she was one of several women who took front-line roles in the city. U.S. Marines man an observation post above the coast near Da Nang, Vietnam, in the late 1960s. One scans with binoculars, while another relays coordinates by field phone, a routine that guided patrols and air support along the shoreline. Sophia Loren reacts behind the wheel after a crowd pressed in on her car in Rome on April 9, 1956, cracking the windshield. The surge of fans surrounded her vehicle as she left an event, a vivid snapshot of movie fever in mid-century Italy. Manchester United and Arsenal captains stand over the ball on a snow-covered pitch in 1926, with the referee ready to start play. A single cleared line marks the center, a chilly snapshot of early football grit. Berlin, March 15, 1939. Adolf Hitler tells Czech President Emil Hácha that German troops will enter Czechoslovakia within hours. Under intense pressure and in poor health during the night meeting, Hácha agreed to terms that led to the occupation of Bohemia and Moravia. On March 30, 1951, a 25th Infantry Division tank fires a flamethrower at a hillside bunker near the Han River in Korea. Specialized tanks like this were used to clear fortified positions during the Korean War. Ground crews prep a B-29 Superfortress for a 1945 raid on Tokyo, stenciling messages on bombs and checking the big 4-engine bomber. These long-range missions launched from island bases and pushed Allied air power deep into Japan. This is the Keaton Music Typewriter, a specialty machine from the 1930s and 1950s that let composers and publishers type notes directly onto staff paper. Its circular keyboard and movable guide placed symbols with pinpoint accuracy long before notation software. A 1960s magazine ad from Sugar Information, Incorporated, tells parents that sugar quenches fatigue and gives quick energy. Early nutrition marketing often promoted sugar for active kids, a message that later faded as health guidance changed. A studio portrait from the 1870s shows a golden lily foot, formed by the long-standing Chinese custom of foot binding. Linked to beauty and status in the Qing era, the practice was officially banned in the early 1900s. In 1921, silent films ran with a house pianist following studio cue sheets to hit every joke and turn exactly on time. Projectors were hand-cranked at about 16 to 22 frames per second, so the same film could run longer or shorter each night. A 1920s photographer caught this laborer giving 3 thumbs up. He had polydactyly, an extra thumb on one hand. The trait appears in about 1 out of 500 to 1,000 births and can be fully functional. In 1948, 2 high school students pose at a cadet corps dance, wearing dress caps, a red cape, and rows of medals for drill and marksmanship. Junior ROTC programs, started by the 1916 National Defense Act, hosted parades, competitions, and formal balls in schools across America. Senior Prom, 1953. 2 Manasquan high school teens pose in front of streamers and brick, pure post-war style. The young man would later become a 3-time Academy Award winner, but here he is, just a New Jersey senior with his date. 1967. Cesar Romero, in full Joker makeup with his famously unshaved mustache, readies a longboard for the campy Surf's Up, Joker's Under episode of TV's Batman. The scene staged a beach surfing contest against Adam West, blending pop art style with California surf culture. Princess Elizabeth, at 18, photographed in 1944 with the poised smile that would soon appear on stamps and coins. Within a year, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, training as a driver and mechanic during World War II. 1967. Sony's new Portapak let people carry a half-inch videotape camera with a shoulder recorder almost anywhere. The kit weighed about 18 pounds and cost around $250, sparking the first wave of portable video. In the 1940s, anthropologist Albert Métraux collected this Haitian sorcerer's passport, a hand-drawn travel charm filled with prayers, symbols, and revenue stamps. People carried papers like this for protection and informal permission when moving between towns. 1980s. Pablo Escobar and his cousin Gustavo pose in a studio dressed like 1930s movie mobsters, complete with vintage suits and staged props. He often used themed portraits and public appearances to craft a larger-than-life persona beyond the headlines. April 1994, supporters in Natal climbed an election board to glimpse Nelson Mandela before South Africa's first vote opened to all citizens. That week, roughly 19 million people cast ballots. The ANC won, and Mandela became president. Late 1930s at Disney, effects artists studied a glass tank and sketched tests to learn how bubbles stretch, wobble, and trail for Pinocchio. They drew each bubble by hand at about 24 frames per second, layering cells to make the undersea scenes feel real. 1979. Roald Dahl at his tiny writing hut in Great Missenden, wrapped in a sleeping bag with a lapboard and a small heater by his chair. From this shed, he wrote by hand on yellow paper, drafting classics like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the BFG. March 21, 1933. Adolf Hitler bows to President Paul von Hindenburg at the opening of the Reichstag in Potsdam's Garrison Church. The carefully staged ceremony linked imperial tradition to the new government, helping build support before the Enabling Act vote 2 days later. Los Angeles, 1916. Crowds watch workers raise the first power pole at Pasadena Avenue and Piedmont Street, opening a new era of citywide electric service. Within a few years, streetcars, streetlights, and homes across growing neighborhoods ran on this network. 1960. Producer Mike Todd Jr. and engineer Hans Laube debut Smell-O-Vision, which piped over 30 cents through seat nozzles in sync with the film's soundtrack. It premiered with Scent of Mystery, but timing delays and hissing ruined the effect, and the idea faded after one feature. Sydney, 1922. Women string the cast-iron harps for grand pianos, each instrument needing roughly 230 steel strings. When finished and tuned, A single piano holds about 18 tons of tension inside that frame. 1939. The ocean liner MS St. Louis reached Antwerp with about 900 Jewish refugees after Cuba, the United States, and Canada refused entry. Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and the UK took them in. But later wartime occupation in Europe meant many were caught again and never returned. 1972. East German border guards reinforced the Berlin Wall, threading fresh barbed wire along a brick section. On the other side, a West German family pauses to look up. Everyday life meeting a fortified border only meters apart. Near the Rhine, Allied deception units staged a full armored camp using 93 lb inflatable tanks and trucks, then carved believable track marks with bulldozers. They even scattered spent shells and placed mock guns so aerial scouts would mistake the scene for a real force. March 25, 1911. A fire at New York's Triangle Shirtwaist Factory killed 146 immigrant garment workers after exit doors were kept locked. The owners were acquitted of manslaughter, later paid $75 per victim in civil damages, while insurance paid them about $60,000 above losses, helping spark new safety laws. P.T. Barnum stands with his star performers Charles General Tom Thumb Stratton, Lavinia Warren, and George Commodore Nutt, photographed in the 1860s. Their New York wedding in 1863 drew huge crowds and worldwide press, making them among the highest-paid entertainers of the era. Philippines, 1944. A U.S. officer, heavily bandaged, rests on a stretcher, while a Catholic Mass continues inside a Leyte church turned field hospital. During the Battle of Leyte, chapels and schools became makeshift wards, where prayer and medical care ran side by side. 1908. Vance, a 15-year-old trapper boy in a West Virginia coal mine, earned about 75 cents for a 10-hour shift, opening and closing a ventilation door for passing cars. The chalkbirds and "Shut this door" warning weren't even visible underground. Photographers only saw them after the plate was developed. 1932 FBI file. Al Capone's rap sheet lists a string of 1920s arrests across New York and Chicago, most marked dismissed or discharged. The charge that stuck was tax evasion in 1931, landing him in federal prison and later Alcatraz. 1946. Emperor Hirohito visits Yokohama to inspect living conditions, his first public tour of daily life after the war. Under Allied occupation, he appeared in a simple suit to present himself as a modern, approachable constitutional monarch. At FBI headquarters in Washington, this case shows weapons seized from the Dillinger Gang in 1933-1934, including cut-down shotguns and a Thompson drum. The standout is a Colt M11911A1 in .38 Super that was modified for full auto with a Thompson foregrip and extended magazine. 1942 publicity shot nicknamed Miss Cywar shows a multi-horn battlefield loudspeaker used to project voice and music toward enemy lines. In World War II, teams paired speakers like this with leaflets and radio to deliver news and surrender appeals over distances of about a mile or more. 1868, Jian Shichai, billed as Chang the Giant, toured America after leaving China, with posters claiming he stood over 8 feet tall. Though never officially measured, he became one of the most photographed towering performers of the 19th century. 1941, Paris. Children ride clamp-on metal skates tightened with a key. Iron wheels that rattled on stone were the cheap, adjustable style most kids used. German propaganda units shot and circulated scenes like this to claim daily life stayed normal in occupied Paris. Thailand, 1983. Monsoon rains swelled the Chao Phraya Basin and left parts of Bangkok underwater for weeks, turning streets into canals. 42 provinces reported flooding, so residents bailed out homes while buses and boats shared the same roads. Stalingrad, 1932. A foundry man skims slag along a line of sand molds, his clothes caked in clay that workers used as a simple heat shield near 1,500-degree metal. In the first 5-year plan, new mills here poured steel for rails and machines, plants that later turned to tank production in the war.